Hi there and welcome back to another NJS instructional video. In this video I'm going to show you how we went about installing these LightFORCE Beast lights on this particular vehicle. Now, as a disclaimer, this video is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to get a qualified auto electrician to wire up your particular lights. Now, the vehicle we have here is a 2017 Isuzu MU-X. However, the principles shown in this video will apply to most other vehicles. For today's installation, we need the LightFORCE Beast lights, which we have here, a headlight patch harness adapter. We have the anti-theft bolt kit as well. And last but not least, we have the wiring harness to suit. Now, in the box, we have our light covers. And we have our LightFORCE Beast lights. And another nice thing with this LightFORCE product is that it's made here in Australia. Now, with these lights, we do get this pigtail harness that comes provided, and that simply clips in on the back. However, because we've got the genuine harness with this kit, we don't actually need to utilize these pigtail harnesses. Now, in the harness kit, we have our instructions. We have a Beast harness rocker switch, which we'll be installing inside of the vehicle. We have our main harness over here. And additionally, we have some additional headlight adapters for a standard fit vehicle. However, since we've purchased the genuine headlight patch harness, this will make it a lot easier for this particular vehicle. We've unraveled our harness, and starting from left to right, we have our relay, which will mount close to the battery. We have our battery positive and battery negative, so they will mount directly to the battery. And we also have an inline fuse just over here. Now, before we start installing the harness, I will be removing that fuse, and that just makes things safer to operate with. We then have our headlight patch connectors over there, and that'll go into our genuine patch harness over here. At the top, we have our two Deutsch connectors which go into the back of each of the LightFORCE lights. Now, this brown wire over here, that's our ignition pickup. Now, if we're doing a standard installation, we don't need to worry about that or use that. However, if we're doing a non-standard installation and we do want to use our Beast lights to pick up the daytime running lamps and use them as a daytime running lamp, then that's when we would be connecting this brown wire. And last but not least, we have our 8-pin wire, which will be feeding through our grommets of the firewall and then installing our rocker switch on the inside of the vehicle. I'm just going to show you how we've set up our anti-theft fasteners. So we've retained the original hex head, which kind of beds into the bracket there, and then use an anti-theft nylock nut on the underside, and then we grab our tool and then we'll tighten that up after. And for the sides of the bracket here, we've removed our hex fastener and then put our anti-theft bolt through there, and again the original nylock nuts are retained. Before we do up all our fasteners and also tighten up our mounting bracket to the bull bar, we'll put some Loctite 243 on the threads where the nut will engage, and that acts as a glue and helps keep everything nice and tight and prevents things from rattling loose over time. Now, I'm just doing up these fasteners finger tight, and we'll soon mount this main mounting bolt to our bull bar. On our ARB Bullbar, we have a number of mounting holes that we can utilize for either LED bars or driving lights like what we have. And we've identified that this larger hole here is the right size for us to mount our LightFORCE Beast lights. And using our provided anti-theft tool and a 17mm socket, we'll tighten up the nut on the inside. Now, we haven't fully tightened it, and that'll allow us to adjust the bracket ever so slightly. So we'll put our second one on, we'll get a straight line, and then we'll tighten it for good when we know everything's nice and straight. Now, we have both lights mounted and mostly tight. We're just going to do a parallel check to make sure that our brackets are fully parallel with each other. So we've just pushed the lights all the way backwards just to give us easier access, and just using our straight edge, they look like they've lined up perfectly. Now that our lights are nice and parallel, we're going to do up these fasteners to 35 Newton meters, and we're going to use a torque wrench set to 35 Newton meters to do that. It's time now to start laying out and installing our harness for the lights. Now to start off with, we'll be tapping into the left-hand headlight and using our headlight patch harness adapter. And this will simply plug and play into our existing light and also our new harness. And these bullet connectors will feed into our harness for the high beam circuit. Now I've just taken off the wing plate on the bull bar, and that just allows us to have better access to run our harnessing through. So you can see there's an opening provided there from factory and the harness for our driving lights, and we'll feed that through the bull bar just over here and into our driving lights. And in the engine bay here, we've just mounted our relay utilizing a factory mounting point there. And our relay and our wiring comes down through there and down over there for the driving lights. I've just cable tied off our ignition wire, which is for the daytime running lamps, and just loosely connected our main harness to the headlight patch connector harness over there. And now we'll start tidying up a lot of these things here in the engine bay. We do have our black cable that will run shortly through the firewall just behind the fuel filter over there, and our battery positive and negative. Now we've run the majority of the harness through, so for the lights we're going through the grill here and as well on the opposite side, and we've just tied that off up nice and high in front of our charged air cooler, so around where the intake air temp sensor is, and just going over underneath. And from the underside, our driving light harness comes through an opening in the bull bar, and we've just secured it with cable ties up really nice and high before we go into the engine bay. And now we're going to feed our 8-pin connector through our firewall grommet just over here. On the passenger side, we're just going to remove our glove box here, just to give us a bit of a better view for that wiring that comes through the firewall grommet. So here in the passenger's footwell, you can see that rubber grommet from the inside and where all those cables come through. So we'll punch through on the top and just carefully avoiding all those factory wires. Now in order to puncture through our grommet in the firewall, I've just got some coat hanger that I've just cut down to size, and I've secured our 8-pin connector and then just put some electrical tape all around that. So as we punch that through, we'll also pull it in from the passenger's footwell, and then that way we can feed in this wire. So we'll just get this routed correctly as well in the engine bay, so when we do pull it tight, it's all nice and how we want it positioned. Now we've just finished up most of the wiring in the engine bay. We're able to punch through that grommet, as you can see, for our 8-pin cable, and we've just left that loose for now until we have a little bit of a better understanding how it runs inside, as we may need to loop it in the engine bay. We've connected our ground as well to the battery over here and just looped it around and tied that off. And we've also connected our battery positive. Now just a reminder, we did disconnect and remove the fuse, which I've put in a easy to access location just over here near the battery. And that way we can still do all of our wiring without needing to worry about shorting out anything should we do something wrong. So that almost completes our engine bay harness install. Now that we've finished the harness and we've punched through the firewall, we will connect the rocker switch loosely in the cab to the other end, and that's before we start fitting it off internally, and we just want to check the function of the lights, that it's all working. We will also have to refit our fuse just to check the operation of the lights. So now that we've confirmed the correct operation, I've just disconnected the rocker switch again from that main cable, and we're going to route it behind our AV system here. I'm going to go all the way to the other side where there's a spare switch blank just over here on the right, and that's where we'll mount our rocker switch. Just feed that through over here. And that's just popped out on the other side, so I'll just grab that all the way there. Now that we've removed our switch blank, we'll just prep our rocker switch for fitment to the vehicle. So we have our rocker switch here with our 8-pin male connector just over here. Now we do have a panel spacer over here and also some double-sided adhesive. Now we won't be using the panel mount assembly, and that's because we're utilizing an OE switch provision. So what we will need is this backing plate here, and that will just feed into our cable like that and just run it behind our switch as such, and that will just simply clip into position like that. And then our rocker switch will simply click into that factory position. And to complete our install, we'll just connect our two 8-pin connectors, male and female, and they do have arrows on them as well as a tab. So there we go. So we'll push that in like that. And we'll just simply push this into position. Now we've secured our Beast rocker switch just here in that empty switch blank that we had before. It is slightly recessed in, and even though this vehicle is not a TY2 compatible, we've still made it work and just secured it from behind with cable ties, so that's not moving anywhere now. So that's nice and firm. Now to aid the installation of our Beast rocker switch, I did remove the factory dimmer, which we'll reinstall shortly. Now that our wiring's all routed and tidied up quite nicely, we're just going to do one final step for in the engine bay, and we're just going to add some Sikaflex to that grommet where that cable did puncture through that grommet, just to give it a nice waterproof seal. Now you do want to wear some gloves, some disposable gloves, because this is quite messy. So we've just added some Sikaflex all around that cable, and that'll take about 24 hours to cure and give us a nice waterproof seal. Now that everything is installed inside the cab, we're going to do a final light check. So we're going to put our fuse back in like that and just put the cover back on like that. So we'll turn our lights on, and we have both LEDs as blue. Turn our high beams on, and then turn our Beast lights on, and that'll go green, and then cycle through the different modes, and then to go to Beast mode you just hold that down. And here is a view from inside. So we have our 8-pin connector wiring coming through that grommet over there. We've tucked it in all the way behind this carpet and insulation, and it goes all along there into the driver's footwell. And here in the driver's side, we've mounted our cable up nice and high over the driving shaft and eventually towards the back of the switch. The final step is to adjust our lights to the position that we want them in, and then tighten up these anti-theft bolts. So there you have it, that's how we went about installing these LightFORCE Beast lights on this particular vehicle. I hope you found this video informative. Don't forget to like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit that bell notification icon. Thanks for watching.